Okay, we're back. What's the next? Oh, so next we read William Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience, and William Blake it's a handful, to say the least. Some of the things you'll read that are supposed to be innocent, and they seem innocent, are definitely more than they appear to be. And that's because William, like I said earlier, it's a really hard time, and one of the examples we talked about often in class was child labor. And so, at this time, poor children would have been often sold off into indentured servitude, and they would become chimney sweeps at a very young age, like 5 or 6, because they were the only people small enough to fit in the chimneys to clean the chimneys. Because if you didn't clean it, the soot would build up, and you could burn down an entire, row of apartments, or, whatever kind of little housing setups they had. Townhouses, I guess. So yeah, if you didn't have a little kid-sized chimney sweep, your house would burn down. So kids were doing it. And they were dying young of black lung. All the soot they were cleaning out of the chimney was getting in their lungs and polluting their bodies. If they didn't die of black lung, they would grow to be too big to fit in the chimney. And if they were lucky, they would be sold off to someone else. If they were unlucky, they would be too big, but they'd still have the same job, and they'd get stuck in the chimneys. And you couldn't get them out of the chimney, so they died in the chimneys. So that's the type of world William Blake lived in. And that's the type of stuff he wrote about. But he didn't just come right out and say it. He kind of hid that meaning in his poems. So that's what to expect when you read William Blake. And if you've ever read any of the Silence of the Lamb, Hannibal Lecter novels, the Red Dragon serial killer his whole obsession is a particular painting by William Blake. So that's what it's like to read William Blake. We also read Moby Dick, and I never made it through Moby Dick all the way. I'd love to one day, but it just probably ain't gonna happen. But I do love Queequeg. He's my favorite character. His tattoos are described as being these purple geometric patterns, and when he first meets Ishmael says that his body looks like it blends in with the quilt that he's sleeping under. And I love that description. And he's just a very loyal, caring character, but he's still a smartass and really fun to read because he's a cannibal from this far-off land. So that's what Queequeg is like. And if you like Queequeg, you'd probably hate the way the book ends. But that's as far as I'm going to say without spoiling it. I guess it's old. I could spoil it. If you haven't read it, it's been out forever. But anyway, we also read Leaves of Grass. And Walt Whitman is not everybody's cup of tea. Not exactly my cup of tea. For what it is, this is a poem, and it looks like paragraphs almost. It's to be something written the first time in 1855. It seems completely postmodern and experimental. It was experimental, but it almost seems like something someone would write today, which is very interesting. And it's a portrait of America as he saw it. That's kind of what all of these people are giving us. A portrait of where they live in a more real and raw and emotive and provocative kind of way than people had ever done before. One author that we were going to read, but we didn't read, was Nathaniel Hawthorne, The Blithedale Romance. I've never read Hawthorne before. I have no idea what this book is like, and I may not end up reading it ever. But if you've read it, if you like it, let me know, and you might persuade me. We also read Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey, and to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Jane Austen. We had to read Pride and Prejudice in high school, and I never made it through it. Same thing happened with Northanger Abbey. I read like a couple pages, and I just couldn't get through it. I don't know why. But I think if I ever do read it, I will appreciate it, because it's about a girl who is described as being almost pretty on her best days, and not too dumb on her best days. And just the way she's described is brilliant to me, and so I think I would really appreciate it if I do read it. But it should just be a matter of getting through it, because I've just never been able to make it through any of Austen's reign. And then we read some later works that my professor considers Romanticism, and that's William Faulkner's The Sound and Fury and Lolita. I had read Faulkner before, and I had read A Rose for Emily, which I really loved. Is that what it is? A Rose for Emily? Yes. And I recommend that short story if you're interested in the Gothic. Romanticism. And I really should read more Faulkner, and I really should read through this, but we were running out of time, and we were speeding through so much that I just kind of neglected to read it, and just kind of listened while we discussed it. But Faulkner writes about his take on the South, and so all of his work has definitely got a Southern Gothic feel, so I really should read it, and I recommend you read it as well. And then Lolita. Before I get to Lolita, Sound and the Fury takes place in the 20s, and Lolita obviously takes place in the 50s. So that's obviously out of the realm of the original time frame of the Romantics, which is basically the span of the 1800s. But these can still be considered Romantic texts. But not because Humbert loves Flo. He's a pedophile. It's not a romance novel. I can't say that enough. I was so worried that when we took this class that there were going to be people in my class that interpreted it as a romance novel because he loves her and because it was romantic texts. But luckily everyone was just as disgusted with the character of Humbert as they're supposed to be. And I guess that's the controversy of it. It is written so beautifully, and the author, Nabokov, is not a native speaker of English, but his English is more beautiful than just about any other English writer ever, in my opinion. And it does have that luxurious, elegant, romantic vibe to it. It does have that feel that you get from these older texts. I'm pointing over here because this is where I stack my books. Anyway, it does give off that feel, and so I guess that's why it's easy to misinterpret it. But I didn't make it all the way through it. I've seen the movie with Jeremy Irons, and from what I remember, I hadn't seen it in years, but what I remember of the movie, it seemed to stick pretty well to the novel, so I'll probably will one day read the rest of this novel. And this version's got notes, and another thing I like about this version is, it's just kind of like the style, it just looks like a typewriter and paper and stuff like that. And I've read someone on Tumblr, I guess, shared a post where someone was discussing how often copies of Lolita had a girl sexualized young girl on the cover, even the Jeremy Irons movie. And that was something that Nabokov was adamantly against. He wanted a very plain cover. He was very clear in his instructions to his publisher. He wanted a plain cover. He never wanted it to ever have Lolita on the cover, because that's exactly what he was trying to get away from. You know, he's trying to, just like the previous texts are bringing to light certain things. This is bringing to light what it's like inside a pedophile, what it could be like inside a pedophile's mind, and just how easily he could use his debonair and his skill with words to make you think just like he thinks. You know, so to put a girl on the cover, a sexualized, lets him win, you know, if you will. So that's what he didn't want. Anyway, that's everything we read for class, and some things we didn't read that I would have hoped we could have read were Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde. This has other stories by Stevenson. I've never read it before. I've never read any of his other stories, but I've always wanted to. And then, another that I highly recommend that we didn't get to was The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This is, if Frankenstein is my favorite novel of all time, Yellow Wallpaper is probably my favorite short story of all time. And it's another ghost story in the Gothic genre, written about 80 years after Frankenstein. And then, let's see, where's my last... Oh. Let me rearrange books here. My last book that I hoped that we would have read or author in general is The Amazing Edgar Allan Poe. And this is my very old, let's see. Can you see that? Let's see if I can. That is the 1903 edition of Edgar Allan Poe. It's a 5-volume set of his completed works. And that is like my most beloved possession in that set of books. It sits alone on its own bookshelf, like enshrined, surrounded by decor, but it's the only set of books on the shelf that it's on. So I would have hoped we would have read Gilman or Stevenson or Poe. But as you see, you know, we read like 10 books, or 9 books. We didn't have time for the 10th book, which was Hawthorne. So, as much as I appreciated the interesting take that my professor gave us, which was how those later works, Faulkner and Nabokov, could fit the romantic mode or the Gothic mode in their own ways. So I really appreciated that, but I kind of had hoped the whole while that we might have read some Poe and some of those other things. But it is what it is. I graduated, and my diploma will maybe be here in a couple of weeks. I don't know. We'll see. And maybe I can show it to you and maybe prove to you that what I say is true. Alright, I hope that helps you guys understand Romanticism a little bit more, and maybe gives you some insight into the literary world at the time of the original dandies, and, you know, maybe what kind of fashion some of these authors and their friends might have worn. Like I said, I was mentioning that Mary Shelley was with her husband or her fiance and her friends, and one of those was Lord Byron, and if Lord Byron's not a dandy, I don't know who is. I mean, well, maybe not. He definitely has the look that dandies want, and his hero that he creates, the Byronic hero, is definitely a figure that would have been a role model for the dandy. So, anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling now, and I'll see you guys next time.